What's going on, everybody? It's a Wednesday. Wednesday is Q&A day. Now, this has been a fun stretch. I've been doing Q&As every week for over a year now. In fact, it's been closer to 13 months. Every single Wednesday. Haven't missed one. So I am proud of that streak, and I'm going to keep it going as much as I can. And, the best part about it, the best part about the Q&As is truly hearing what you guys are interested in. Because when, I'm sitting here and I'm putting together videos on different things, I don't really know if the things that I think are interesting are things that you all will think are interesting. But when you ask me specific questions, there is at least one person who is saying, this is something I'm curious about. I'm curious on hearing you talk about. And then one of the best parts after that is checking out the comments and seeing what everybody else has to say about the same topics. There are going to be times that people agree with me, and there are going to be times that people don't agree with me, and that's totally okay. And there were some topics that over the last couple of weeks I have talked about that a couple of people, or more than a couple, were not really thrilled with my response on. One of those particular topics comes back up this week, so I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on sort of my feelings on the topic as I I give my take on sort of a follow-up to that particular topic. As always, these are not factual things. These are not it's right or it's wrong. These are all opinions. These are opinion-based things, and they're simply my opinion. I'm never going to claim that I'm always right. I've absolutely had all of you change my opinion on things multiple times. So, I'm definitely open to having my opinion changed, but as things stand at this moment, I share where I stand on that particular topic. Always, if you have a question, all you have to do is in the comments below, simply type out your question. It is a joy each week to take a look at what you all are curious about. Let's take a look at our first question right now. If you have the opportunity to buy the same card assigned the same grade by PSA and by BVG or SGC, and the non-PSA card has greater eye appeal and is offered at a considerably lower price, will you still buy the PSA card? If so, do you consider yourself a true collector? All right, so there's a few things I want to say about this. Now, this is a question that I touched a little bit on last week, and then I was on my friend Theo's channel a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the different grading companies, whether they be BVG, PSA, SGC, CGC, and we were talking about them, and I shared my honest opinion of the different grading companies, and there are a fair amount of people that didn't necessarily like my opinion, and I'm okay with that. I genuinely am okay with that. So I'm going to try to give a little bit more explanation and some analogies. I'm going to try to explain my thoughts on this topic. But first, the question at the end said, would you consider yourself a true collector? I've heard that term used. I don't know what a true collector means. I mean, I know what the words mean, but the term true collector, is that an implication that if, you only prefer certain slabs, then, you don't really collect cards, you collect slabs? I think that that's what that's suggesting. And I don't personally agree with that. I think that, but at the same time, if somebody says, Greg, you're not a true collector, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I don't need someone to think I'm a true collector because, and again, I don't really know what that means. To the point of the question, and the point of some of the comments that some people had made previously about, what I had said about PSA and SGC versus some of the other grading companies. Now, let me just throw a few things out there first. When you're talking about grading companies, a grading company is a service, right? And the service that is provided is not everybody would have the same opinion of that service. Now, if there was without a doubt one thing is better than another, for example, if you had a tire that can last 100,000 miles instead of a 20,000 mile rated tire, it's kind of universally accepted that the 100,000 mile tire is better because of the material, because of the quality, because of the thickness of different things. That is not really debatable. But when you talk about a service, things are not as easy as they're all the same. So the suggestion that BVG is equal to PSA, or SGC is equal to PSA, or SGC versus CGC are equal. The suggestion that all of those are the same, I don't think is necessarily accurate. I think there are times that each of those four are probably do a better job than the others. And there are times that they do worse. You know, my wife, I get my hair cut on the back patio. My wife takes clippers like I'm a sheep, and she just shears me like a sheep, and then that's good enough for me. That's fine. I got my hair cut. My wife, however, is not gonna do that. My wife is gonna go to like a salon. And she's not just gonna probably go to a salon, she's gonna probably go to a particular salon. And at that particular salon, she probably has a person that she thinks does the best job. So it's like not all haircuts are the same. Sure, a haircut is a haircut, but they're not the same depending on if you go to different people. You know, and suggesting that CGC is the same as PSA or BVG is the same as SGC, I don't agree with that. Now, let me say one more piece of that, and then I'll circle back to the question again. The other thing about this particular topic is when you're talking about something like grading, some of us come in with baggage. We don't all come in with the same opinion. If you've been burned by PSA, you probably are not big on PSA, and you are good with anybody but PSA. If you've been burned by SGC, you probably are not interested in SGC. So I, historically speaking, for years, 25 years, all I bought was PSA slabs. The only slabs I had were PSA. And then about 2 years ago, I started also purchasing SGC slabs. And I was like, SGC has proven to me that they're reliable. I think they're a good company. I like their customer service. I like their reliability. And I opened my mind to SGC. And now I have started accumulating SGC slabs as well. And the piece that, is kind of like maybe a little bit of baggage that I bring to the table is there was one time I bought from a different company. And it was a third party that is still in existence. It is one of the smaller grading companies. And I did a video on this. And I bought a card. It was a 1951 Whitey Ford rookie card. And I bought it, and it was in a 2-holder. And it was really well centered. It had really good eye appeal. I really liked the card. But it was in this third-party slab. And I felt like it was a good deal. It was online. And it looked really nice. And so I bought it. And my thought process was, I'll either crack it out and leave it ungraded, or I'll crack it out and then I'll send it in to one of the other grading companies. Well, what happened was I brought it home and I gave it a really good look. It was a lot of these slabs are not crystal clear. There are lots of scratches. And I looked it over really good. I used heavy magnification. I looked it over and everything looked fine. I said, you know what? I'm just going to crack it out and either leave it raw or send it in to SGC or PSA. So I cracked it and I opened it. And then I looked it over again to see if there were any little surface creases. And looking at it, I could tell there had been color added. There had been color added to the card. Now, the card was not listed as altered. It was not listed as having a mark. It received a 2. And the 2 was not because it had color added, because they give alteration. This company gives altered grades to cards that were altered. So they didn't catch it. They didn't catch the color added that I caught in, a couple of minutes. And you say, well, why didn't you just, why didn't you see that it was color added before? And it's like, it was an older case. It was kind of scratched up. You couldn't tell until you got it out of the case. I couldn't tell that there had been color added. So the point of my story in telling this is there are certain companies that have earned your trust. If my roof is leaking and I have a friend who lives down the street who has used a roofer who is proven to be very trustworthy and reliable, I'm much more likely to call that roofer who they recommended to me than just looking online and seeing for what roofing company can come out. Because the reliability, my experience, it matters. So for me, is PSA perfect? No. Is SGC perfect? No. But have they proven to me time and time and time again that they are reliable? For the most part, they have proven reliable. The one time I veered away from the two companies that have proven to be relatively reliable to me, I got burned. And again, I did a video on this exact topic, on this exact card, on this exact situation. So it's not as easy as saying a card is a card. Whether it's in a CGC holder or a PSA holder, it's about the card. Well, it is about the card, but you can't really always see everything about the card when it is in a holder. So then it comes down to, well, who do you trust? And who is proven to be reliable? The roofing company that has proven to be reliable to me, that is much more likely to be reliable in the future, is the companies that I have experience with. So that's my take. And back to the question, does that make me not a true collector? I suppose people can call me anything, and I'm okay with it. And I do believe in collecting the card and not the slab and not the grade. But if it's a company that you don't have a lot of experience with and you're not super comfortable with, and they haven't kind of proven themselves to you, then why go that direction when there are a lot of cards out there, and there are a lot of cards out there in holders of companies that have proven to be pretty reliable, especially when it comes to something like the authentication of the card. So, do things slip by all the companies? Of course. But with the technologies and the resources that a company like PSA has versus some of the smaller companies, and my experience with all of them, I just have some companies that I tend to trust. So yes, if my car breaks, do I take it to a mechanic? For sure. Do I take it to any mechanic? Is every mechanic the same? Because it's a mechanic? No. There are some mechanics who have proven to me trustworthy to bring my car to, and there are others that I don't know. It doesn't mean that the other mechanics aren't good mechanics. It just means, why would I go to them if I'm kind of okay going to the place that I've always gone? I recently went into a card shop for the first time that is other than my local shop. I had purchased a really nicely priced Schmidt rookie card from him at a show. However, at the shop, we started talking about prices on cards I was considering buying. I was referencing current sold listings as value, and he said that vintage is vintage. Book value comes first. I was surprised considering the Schmidt deal. Did selling at a show play as part of the price? Your thoughts? Okay, so this is a really interesting situation. And obviously, I don't know all the details of, how all this transpired. And did you maybe get a better deal because the card was at a show and that particular seller was looking to sell cards? Possibly. But more likely than not, what I have found is we all kind of find what we are comfortable with. And once we find what we are comfortable with, we kind of stick with that. And some of us are comfortable with newer technologies, and some of us are more comfortable with older technologies. And it doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. It's just kind of how we are. And so there are absolutely some people who have a variety of different apps like myself to check the most recent sales of cards. There are also people out there that still use literally printed price guides to find their prices. And does that mean that they're wrong and I'm right? No. Does it mean that my prices are more updated? Maybe. Well, probably. But it doesn't mean that simply going out of the book is like bad or that person is wrong. Now, I think and again, I have to kind of make some assumptions in this situation, but my assumption is what this dealer was saying is vintage cards are pretty stable. There aren't huge jumps up, there aren't huge jumps down when it comes to vintage cards. It's not like suddenly the 53 mantle is going to triple in value. So the movements are slow. But it is possible that a Wander Franco card could go down 90% in 2 weeks. So because of the stability of vintage cards, just because the careers are over, in most cases their lives are over, and because of that, they're stable. It's like a barge. A barge doesn't turn very quickly. It takes a really long time for a barge to turn. But a little ski boat can turn pretty sharp. And there can be quick movements. And modern cards take quick movements up and they take quick movements down. Now, does that mean that being on print for your price guide is the best bet? I would say no. I have personally seen several dealers, generally vintage, generally older gentlemen, that still use print guides. And when I see that, this is what my mind says. Like literally, this is what my mind says. My mind goes, oh, they use a printed price guide. Those price guides are probably at least 60 days from data from 60 days ago. So he's 60 days behind. So if there was a player who, for whatever reason, would have a little spike or something, I'm going to look for that guy's card. So if, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was, when Minnie Minoso makes the Hall of Fame, right? He makes the Hall of Fame one day. His cards are going to be affected almost instantly. From the moment the announcement is made, a lot of people are going to go buy Minnie Minoso cards, right? Well, the guy who's got the printed book still has the same printed book from the day before. So if for some reason I came across a dealer who had paper book that's where they got their prices from, I would tend to look through those cases. If I was looking for a deal, again, I'm not going to just buy a card because suddenly it went up. I would have to want the card. But the deals at that table are going to be the players who there may be a recent trend move in a certain direction. So doesn't make them right, doesn't make them wrong, but vintage cards usually move more slowly up and down. And as a result, having prices from trends from 30 to 60 days ago isn't as big of a deal as it would be for a Brock Purdy card or, a Justin Jefferson, right? So that's kind of my take on what transpired there. But again, I'm making a lot of assumptions, but that's kind of what my hunch is. Will vintage cards be like the Social Security system right now? The baby boomer generation is so big, and the younger folks are not taking up the slack to pay into the system, and it's going broke. Can cards be like that as baby boomers pass their collections on to family members, which are mostly vintage and pre-war and large collections, that come onto the market for sale and not enough young people wanting them? And then the value gets a hit? All right. So are vintage cards like Social Security? Is it that we're so reliant on this one group who are really the main participants in it that once those participants go away, the group that's coming up behind them is not going to have the same amount of participation in it, and as a result, it's going to plummet prices. Now, I think we all wonder this, and none of us, obviously, none of us know. So we're all just speculating. That said, I have a couple of things I would respond to this. Number one, I did a video the other day, a week ago about, and I interviewed Mike Petty, a collector, great guy, and another great guy, Orlando, from A Collector's Dream. And I asked basically the same question. I said, what do you say when people are commenting? Because they've both been collectors for a long time. And Orlando was a dealer for a long time. I said, what do you say when people say the older players are going to be irrelevant? Nobody's going to care about them. Everyone's going to care about the modern players. All the people who care about the older players are going to die. And once they die, nobody will care about those cards anymore. And they both laughed. And they both said, people have been saying this for 30 or 40 years. This is not a new concept. This is not a new thought process. And I mean, if you go back 40 years, what were the hot cards 40 years ago? Like a Dwight Gooden rookie card, a Kirby Puckett rookie card, a Roger Clemens rookie card, a Dale Murphy rookie card. Those were the hot cards 40 years ago, right? And people were saying nobody's going to care about Lou Gehrig. Nobody's going to care about Ty Cobb. They're going to care about Dwight Gooden. Well, how's that worked out? But that is not a new belief. And that's not me saying it's not a new belief. That's these two longtime guys, been collecting as long as I've been alive. Those guys are saying that. So I'm not the only one saying that. So that's kind of my first response. Now, my second response is more into the economics of how prices work, right? We know that prices are determined based on the amount of supply and the amount of demand. That is nothing new. I'm not bringing anything earth-shattering to the table here, but we know that. Now, when the supply is extremely low on something, okay? When the supply is extremely low, then a change in demand does not really affect the price as much. So if there are only, and I'll put it into a real life situation or an example. If we're talking about like the T206 Honus Wagner, right? I've lost count of how many there are. Let's just say there are 30. Somebody out there is saying, you don't know how many. I don't know exactly how many. Let's say it's 30. If there's 30 of them, it only takes 30 people to want one for there to be competition in the price, right? If we're talking about a 52 mantle in a PSA 10, and there's like a couple of them, It doesn't take very many people to want one to keep the price really high, right? But if there's a lot of something, let's just take what's there a lot of? 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson, okay? There are lots of that. 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. Lots and lots and lots of those two cards. Because there are so many, if the demand went down a little bit, the prices would go down a lot. Because in order to support that high of a price, we need a lot of people to want one. We need a high demand to support the high supply. So the cards that are going to be the least affected, if there is a reduction in demand, are going to be the most expensive cards because they're rare. The Mickey Mantle 52 Topps is always going to be expensive because there's always going to be 5 rich people who really, really want one. And as a result, it doesn't take many people to support those high prices because the supply is so low. The cards that will be affected the most, and this is making the assumption that people are going to stop caring about vintage, which I don't really think that's going to happen. But if that happens, the cards that are going to be affected a lot are going to be the cards that there are a lot of. And the cards that are going to be affected the least are going to be the ones that are the rarest. So if this is something that you are actually concerned about, my recommendation would be high grade, go after high grade stuff, go after really, and why high grade? Because there's a low supply of it. Go after pre-war stuff, turn of the century stuff. Why pre-war and turn of the century? Because there's a low supply of it. And again, when there's a low supply of something, it doesn't take much demand to support the high prices. The time that you're going to have trouble, the time that prices might collapse, is when the demand drops and the supply is large. So you should always collect what you like. But if you're afraid of potentially a collapse in the market, which I'm not laying awake at night worrying about that. But if that was something I was concerned about, high grade, rare stuff, old pre-war turn of the century stuff is the stuff that I would predict would be affected the least because they're so rare, it doesn't take many people that want them in order to support the prices.
My question is, why is the artificial scarcity with modern cards frowned upon? Why is natural scarcity of vintage cards preferred over artificial scarcity of modern cards? I enjoy knowing the number of copies of cards that I own and knowing the print run of that particular card. In addition to appreciating the numbered modern cards, I appreciate the beauty of vintage baseball, football, and basketball cards that are in my collection. The 1966 Philadelphia Gale Sayers rookie card is an awesome vintage card to own and see in person. I enjoy collecting both the modern shiny cards and the old school vintage cards.
All right. This is another thing that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people talk about, hey, why do these old timers, why do these vintage collectors say that the low numbered cards are not going to be valuable in the long term? The only things that will be valuable in the long term are the things that are naturally rare, not the things that are manufactured rare, right? So just my opinion, just my 2 cents, just my thought process. First, what are some things that were manufactured to be rare that are really expensive because they're rare? I don't know of many. There are the little Hummel figurines right? Those little statues of like a little kid holding like a hula hoop or whatever. I don't even know what those things are. Little kids standing there, right? And then they numbered them for a while. And those were made to be rare. You got the little statues, you see the statues of like Willie Mays, the little porcelain, I don't even know what they're made out of, little porcelain statues and things where they're numbered out of like 100. They come with the little certificate. They're in a box where they're packed up tight. None of those things are really that valuable. So to me, things that are valuable are like a Michelangelo. Why is it valuable? Because it's got high demand and it's got low supply, and he didn't number his stuff last I checked, right? He didn't number his paintings. There's just not a lot of times that I think manufactured scarcity has driven prices to continue to be high long term. And so then you go, well, why? Because I think that there, again, are two things that drive prices. It's supply and it's demand. Now, let's just take the Wemby card that recently was pulled. That's like a 1 of 1, and right, it's off center, but it's still got a 10, that whole card. There's a lot of demand for that card right now. Why? I don't know. No. Why? Seriously, why is there a lot of demand for that card? The reason there's a lot of demand for that card is because it's rare, right? The demand derives from the rarity. It's not that it has high demand and it happens to be rare. It's not that, there aren't any of them, but everybody wants them, right? The only difference between that Wemby and a Wemby that sells for, $12 right now is that it's got the number stamped on it and the color that it was printed around the border is different. So the reason everybody wants that one is because it's rare, not because they want it and it just happens to be rare. So anytime that the demand is a result of the rarity versus it has demand and it's rare, and people say, well, Greg, people want the Honus Wagner because the Honus Wagner is rare. To a certain extent it is, but part of the reason they want the Honus Wagner is because it's Honus Wagner and it has become an iconic card. It has become one of the most important and recognizable cards in the hobby. And I don't think that we could say that about Wemby, at least not at this point. And some people say, are you crazy? Maybe, probably. So I think that's kind of my take, is the reason that the demand is high for these 1 of 1 cards is because they're 1 of 1 cards. Now, if it was true demand for a card and it was rare, that's the other piece. Now, here's the other thing. Anything that's numbered was designed to be rare. Those things have always been treated with, literally you see these like breakers. They're like wearing like gloves. They're pulling cards. They go immediately out of the pack, immediately into a sleeve, immediately into a top holder. And they're treated like they're, something much more important than they are. The statues I was talking about, the Hummels and the figurines and the base, those things come in like all of this like styrofoam and stuff, packed into a box all tight, tape and wrapped up like it's something special. Now, when it's manufactured scarcity, the condition almost becomes a non-factor because it's treated as if it's valuable from the moment it comes off the assembly line. But something that is naturally scarce, something that is naturally rare, and is in good condition, when it wasn't meant to be rare, that's really rare. And And that's the reason that a 52 mantle and a 9 holder is got like legitimate, lasting, long-term rarity value, because it wasn't meant to be rare. It just is rare to find one in that condition because it wasn't meant to be preserved. Versus the things now that were literally meant to be preserved and protected immediately. That's my take. I might be crazy. I don't know. Tell me, am I crazy? It's possible, but that's my take.
My question for this week is, when you submit cards for grading, do you send them in yourself or take them to a local card shop and let them send them in? What is the advantage of letting your local card shop send them to the grading company?
This is a really good question. It's a question that I think is, well, let's just get after it. I've never taken my cards to somebody else to submit them. Okay. I think that it's not a bad service, though. Some people are uncomfortable. They might be intimidated with the concept of going on to PSA, setting up an account, dealing with that, connecting all of their information, filling out a form, not sure, are they packaging the cards right? Are they sending the cards off? And instead you can have this company who's going to you just give them the cards and then they take care of it. And usually the price is pretty similar. And sometimes it's even cheaper because they get bulk rates. So it's about the same price, and you don't have to know what you're doing. You don't have to mess with it. It's just easier to drop off your cards. I could see why that would be appealing. And some of these, guys that do this, they've been doing it for a long time, and they offer other services, like they'll screen the cards, for example, and they'll say, hey, what kind of grades are you hoping for? And they say, well, I'm hoping for a card that I think could get a 7 or better. And they'll kind of look it over, and maybe they'll notice something on it that you didn't notice. It's a second set of eyes. And they go, hey, I noticed a little wrinkle on this one. I don't think it has any chance for a 7. Do you still want to submit it? And then you can kind of reconsider. So it's kind of a second set of eyes. So they'll take care of it for you. You don't have to get your hands dirty, deal with it, mess with it. And at the same time, there's a second set of eyes to kind of screen it. So I could see why that would be appealing. If you are somebody who's planning on sending in lots and lots of cards, and you're trying to do it as cheaply as you can, and you're confident in the process, I don't personally think I would send a card through somebody else, just because I would just assume that my cards go through as few people's hands as possible, not more. Like, I would just assume it go from my hands to PSA's hands, then my hands to someone else's hands, to PSA's hands, to someone else's hands, to my hands. It just feels more secure to me to just do it myself. So my take and my experience is doing it myself. Do I know people that have gone through a third party to do it? 100%. Were they happy with it? Some of them were, yeah. If you're not as knowledgeable, if somehow you're watching this video and it came across your feed and you're not super knowledgeable about what you've got or what PSA even means or SGC means or any of these grading companies, and you're just like, I just have these cards, I want to maximize my value, I think I've heard that I should get them graded, I don't know what I'm doing though, I don't know how to do this, do a card saver 1, what does that even mean? I could see why just dropping it off at the local shop might be your best bet. So I like that these services are out there for the people who appreciate them and need them and want them and use them. I think it's great. It's not something I anticipate I will use, but hey, you never know. That's it for this week. If you have a question for next week, I truly look forward to checking them out. Don't be shy. If you have a question, in the comments below, simply type out your question. You don't have to email me. You don't have to say, hey, Greg, here's my question. You could just type the question. And I look forward to seeing them, and I look forward to giving you my thoughts on your questions next week.